Hey gamers, my name is Sai and I'm your guy for Overwatch strats. For today's lesson in Overwatch 2, we're looking into prepping for fights and thinking next. By the end of this workout, we'll gain the skills to think ahead before fights and react accordingly by recognizing your strengths, weaknesses, and making steps to confront them. One of the most important aspects of any competitive game is knowing what's next. Knowing how to place a block in Tetris, where to fortify your walls in Rainbow Six Siege, and for here, how to handle issues in future fights for Overwatch. It's one thing to track Ryan's Shatter or Genji's Blade, but what about your positioning? Your team's comp against theirs? These are basics to think about after every fight, whether to know how to react or to take steps on managing the problem. Don't stay idle between fights. We think next. Let's have a quick warm-up by going into quick play and playing as you normally would, but by taking notes. These notes can be ults that you see, depths on the board, rotations from the enemy team, or so on. Haven't seen Ana Nano in a bit? Keep that in mind. Are they running dive comp into your barrier comp? Note it. Know where your team is standing and where the enemy team may come from. Take note of at least 5 different status updates throughout the game and see if you can make any changes due to them, and if any makes a difference. Once you can begin to identify these changes, you can start to have conscious tabs on specific situations, like upcoming fights. Before jumping into the game, it's important to know the different stages of a fight. If we're striving to work on pre-fight thinking, then we need to identify when we're in a pre-fight situation. Has a recent fight resolved and the team is currently grouping together or positioning? Are you back at spawn with your team, or is the enemy team back at spawn? Are you on the trek to getting to point with no real fight yet? This would most likely be considered a pre-fight stage. Think about the usual thoughts you would have at this time, like, oh, I should have done this, or I wish we didn't do that. Recognize that even passively, you are able to identify strengths and weaknesses to recent fights, and how you may change your playstyle before the next fight. Try to make these thoughts more tangible, so from I should have not been there to I could have played in this position because of this reason. Utilize your conscious tabs and notes from the previous warm-ups to make action statements like, if I see a pharmacy, I should stray away from drops, or I know Mei has ult, therefore I will position in this manner. Once you get the hang of creating action statements to your pre-fights, work on now listing one strength and one weakness going into fights. If you're not already in quick play for these, it's recommended as to add a sense of uncertainty to the mix. Strengths and weaknesses can be cooldowns, ults and their percentages, team comps, map layout, counters, and so on. A strength could be we can combo Nano Blade in next fight, and a weakness could be their dive and our supports would die to dive. Once this is comfortable, ensure you're able to list a couple of strengths and weaknesses before every team fight, both for yourself and others. Now that you're a pro at identifying specific and productive statements about the game and how it affects winning the game, it's now making the measures to make changes due to this new information. Make at least one change before every team fight, whether physically or mentally. This could be repositioning yourself or your team for an advantage, or to avoid a problem like a game-winning combo. This could be swapping out heroes, planning out combos with your team, whether with ults or cooldowns, changing the tempo of your team's aggression, or so on. Want to learn more basics on making these decisions? Check out Coach Psylrn for some inspiration. Now it's time to get vocal on these. Remember the one change you had last drill? Now it's time to amp up to 2 changes, whether to utilize a strength or tackle a weakness and vocalize it. This can be out loud to yourself or in voice chat with your team. The important part is that you're saying it, as in the future this will help communicate to your team or to yourself on what to expect. Predict and prep for your next team fight. This can be done in quick play or competitive, as long as you're taking the stretch to vocalize your knowledge. While you keep working on identifying the situation, making changes due to it, and vocalizing it, take the time in between games to think about any fights that went not as well as you hoped. Can you label the problem? Can you think of new ways to avoid this in future team fights? Self-reflection is a true asset to a player, and in future videos, you'll see me and Coach Psylrn review this in depth. That being said, I'm Coach Psylrn, and we've just reviewed pre-fights and thinking next. Keep pressing W and see you next time.